They tried to declare me mentally incompetent to steal my estate, bringing the lawyer and the forged papers to my own kitchen table. But what they failed to realize is that protecting your finances from family abuse is demonstrating mental competence, not the opposite. I had already contacted my lawyer, changed the locks, and transferred the property to a protected trust. The look on their faces when they realized they were trying to steal an empty treasure chest? Priceless. That moment of confrontation, when the truth hit them, was years in the making. It began subtly with the emotional manipulation, the constant questions, the forced apologies, and the veiled concerns about my finances. But the real threat finally surfaced during a visit from Claudia. Claudia sat in my living room, delivering the family's message with forced seriousness. She spoke about shame, about what people would think if I didn't cooperate, and then she delivered the veiled threat. She even suggested that her contacts in social services could be involved. When she realized none of her emotional tactics were effective, she switched to a more direct, chilling approach. "Georgia," she said, trying to sound reasonable, "I'm going to be frank with you. Dana and Ryan are considering seeking legal help. There are ways to declare a person mentally incompetent if they show erratic behavior with their finances." There it was. The true intention behind all the fake concern. If I didn't voluntarily hand over control, they would attempt to seize my finances by force. I stood up, cutting her off instantly. "Claudia, I suggest you consult with a good lawyer before trying that. I just came from an appointment with mine, and he assured me that a person who protects their finances from family abuse is demonstrating mental competence, not the opposite." The look on her face changed immediately. She realized she had shown her cards too soon. She began to backtrack, stammering, "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you meant exactly that," I interrupted, my voice sharp. "And now that I know what your true intentions are, I think this conversation is over." I walked her silently to the door. Before she left, she tried one last appeal. "Georgia, I hope you reconsider. A family war doesn't benefit anyone." "There is no war, Claudia," I told her. "There is only a woman who has finally learned to value herself." After she left, I sank into my living room chair, the weight of her words heavy on me. Not only were they planning to intensify the emotional abuse, but they were also considering legal measures to gain control over my money. That evening, I called my attorney, Mr. Coleman. I recounted Claudia's threat about seeking a declaration of mental incompetence. He reassured me, explaining that such a declaration requires solid medical evidence and an extensive legal process. Acting responsibly with my personal finances certainly wouldn't qualify as evidence of incompetence. However, he also issued a warning. I needed to document everything. He advised me to record conversations if possible, keep records of their threats, and consider getting a preventative psychological evaluation to have evidence ready. The conversation with Claudia was just the preliminary skirmish. The real battle came when my own children, Charles and Leo, along with Leo's wife, Penelope, gathered around my kitchen table, ready for what they thought would be my final surrender. The properties I had bought, renovated, and managed for decades were suddenly deemed too much responsibility for me now. The investments I had grown from an initial $5,000 to the $1.5 million they thought I possessed suddenly required younger, sharper minds. They arrived quickly. "We've already made all the arrangements," Leo said, forcing a smile. "You just need to sign a few papers." I looked at them, feigning confusion. And what will happen to my properties? The silence that followed was suffocating. Penelope nervously cleared her throat, and Leo fiddled with his napkin until it nearly tore. "Don't you worry about that, Mom," Leo finally said. "We'll take care of everything." That night, I pretended to take the sleeping pills Penelope had given me, spitting them into a napkin when she wasn't looking. I needed to be wide awake for what was coming. At 11 p.m., I heard their voices in the kitchen. They assumed I was sound asleep, a fatal mistake that allowed me to gather the final, irrefutable evidence. "The beach house is worth at least $300,000. Charles whispered, shuffling papers on my oak dining table, the same table where I had signed my first real estate contract 40 years prior. And the downtown condo, another $200,000, not to mention the investments in the bank. We have to act fast, Penelope murmured, pouring champagne into the glasses I had gifted them for their anniversary. Before she realizes what's happening. Leo laughed, that cruel laugh he had developed after marrying her. Realizes? Are you kidding? She asked me what time it was 3 times yesterday. A lie. I had intentionally feigned that confusion earlier in the day, a calculated test to see just how much poison had seeped into my own blood. The answer burned in my gut like acid. Look at this, Penelope said, waving a paper I recognized as my will. Once she's in the home, we can argue mental incompetence. The lawyer is already prepped. Charles calculated aloud, scribbling numbers in a notebook. $400,000 for the main house, $300 for the beach house, $200 for the condo, and the investments add up to another $600,000, almost $1.5 million in total. They were so arrogant, so focused on their prize. They didn't even notice the small digital recorder I had hidden beneath the tablecloth, capturing every word of their conspiracy. This recording, along with others made over the past year, would be the complete destruction of their plans. Earlier, anticipating this exact scenario, I had contacted Mr. Cromwell, a specialist in elder fraud and asset protection. I had spent months ensuring my true assets were secured and protected from their greedy reach. I had all the original documents ready, the recordings we had already made, and the final piece of the trap, a video I had recorded 2 years ago, sensing this betrayal was inevitable. In that video, I detailed my true plans, explained my reasons, and revealed secrets about my children they thought were buried forever. My faithful friend, Eliza, a witness to their years of disrespect, was also involved. She had information that would be very enlightening to the court. Mr. Cromwell had asked me, "Are you sure you want to do this? Once we start, there's no turning back." I thought of Penelope's fake smile, Charles's lies, and Leo's overwhelming greed. I thought of the years I had sacrificed to build a future for children who saw my impending death only as a business opportunity. I told Mr. Cromwell, "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." The morning of the confrontation, I stood firm. I walked toward my house with steps that echoed like hammer blows on the pavement. It was strange to view my own home as enemy territory, but that was precisely what it had become. The invaders had taken my castle, believing I was weak and defeated. I walked into the living room where Charles, Leo, and Penelope, along with the lawyer they had hired, Mr. Evans, were waiting. Tobias, a small man with a mustache, who looked as nervous as my children, was also present, clearly regretting his involvement in the farce. They had spread out all the fake documents for the fraudulent transfer of my properties on the dining room table. "Sign here, Mom," Leo said, handing me a pen, a look of desperate eagerness pressing against his skin. He cleared his throat nervously while Penelope exchanged quick glances with Charles. "I don't know what you mean," Leo muttered, but his voice trembled, giving him away completely. "I think you know exactly what I mean." Just then, Mr. Cromwell knocked on the door. Mr. Evans, their nervous little lawyer, stood up from the table. "Who is it?" "My legal representative," I announced, my voice cutting the air like glass. "George Cromwell, specialist in elder fraud and asset protection." The color drained from my children's faces. Tobias took a step back. Mr. Cromwell entered with Eliza at his side, carrying a briefcase that I knew contained the complete destruction of their plans. He introduced himself cordially to Mr. Evans, who immediately began to sweat. "I believe we are here to discuss a proposed voluntary transfer of assets, ostensibly due to Mrs. Thompson's supposed cognitive decline." "Mr. Rode," Cromwell stated calmly. "However, I would first like to share some prior context." He showed them the digital recorder. "I have here the confessions we recorded exactly 1 year ago, when your mother suspected this day might come." The last vestiges of color completely vanished from my children's faces. Charles gripped the back of a chair as if he were about to faint. "I don't know what you're talking about," Leo lied, his voice barely a whisper. Mr. Cromwell pressed play on the recorder. Charles's voice filled the room with chilling clarity. "Let's just hope she dies soon. I'm tired of pretending I care. As soon as she's in the ground, we sell everything and split the money." Leo's voice followed. "All we need is to find a way to declare her incompetent. After that, it'll be easy to take control of everything." And finally, Penelope's voice. "She's just a stubborn old woman. If she doesn't cooperate, we'll put her in the cheapest home we can find, and that's that." The silence that followed was deathly. Tobias looked at me with genuine horror, realizing the conspiracy he had stumbled into. "Those recordings are taken out of context," Charles stammered, but there was no conviction left in his voice. "Out of context?" "Mr." Cromwell laughed without humor. "I have 3 hours of similar recordings, all made with your mother's knowledge and consent, as she has suspected your intentions for years." Eliza walked to the table and gathered all the fake documents they had prepared. She reviewed them one by one with the authority of someone who knew every detail of my real papers. "These documents are fraudulent," she announced. "The signatures are forged, and several of the assets mentioned here don't even exist in the official records." "That's impossible," protested Mr. Evans, but he was already packing his things, clearly desperate to flee the situation. "It's very possible when someone has been planning to rob their own mother for years," I said finally, my voice filled with an authority that had been dormant for too long. "And it's especially possible when that mother is much smarter than you ever imagined." I was not simply protecting my assets. I had already legally secured them. Days earlier, anticipating their plan to use the house as their primary leverage, I had transferred ownership of my main residence to a specialized legal entity. In effect, when they asked me to sign the papers to sell my house, I had already sold it to myself through a protected trust that they couldn't touch, effectively making their legal maneuvering obsolete. This was the moment of the empty treasure chest. Mr. Cromwell then took out the envelope containing the video I had recorded 2 years ago, the video where I revealed not only my true plans, but also some secrets about my children that would destroy them completely. "Now," I said, sitting at my own table like the CEO I had always been, "it's time to talk about the consequences of betraying the woman who gave you life." Their faces were perfect portraits of absolute terror, and I was just getting started. "Sit down, all of you," I ordered in a voice that allowed no argument. Charles, Leo, and Penelope settled into their chairs like students being punished. Mr. Evans had tried to slip away, but Mr. Cromwell had discreetly blocked his exit. "First," I began, pacing in front of them like a prosecutor before a jury, "let's talk about real numbers. You believe my estate is worth approximately $1.5 million. I saw them exchange nervous glances. They had done their calculations in secret, believing I had no idea of the true value of my properties. "You're off by more than $3 million. The silence was absolute. Even Eliza looked at me with surprise, though she knew I had secrets within secrets. "My real net worth," I continued, savoring every second of their shock, "including the properties you don't know about, the international investments, and the businesses I've been managing discreetly for decades, exceeds $5 million. Penelope turned as white as a sheet. Charles gripped the arms of his chair as if the world were shaking beneath him. $5 million, Leo whispered, his voice breaking. $5.2 million, to be exact. Money you thought you could steal while I was playing with knitting needles in some deplorable institution." Mr. Cromwell opened his laptop and projected a presentation onto the wall. It was a detailed summary of all my properties, investments, and bank accounts. The numbers appeared one after another, each figure hitting my children like a financial slap in the face. Main house appraised at $600,000, beach house at $450,000, the downtown condo even higher than they thought. Their attempt to claim mental incompetence had failed spectacularly. Eliza placed the final document on the table. My real will. The one that truly mattered. "This is my true will," I announced. "It was drafted 3 years ago. and updated 6 months ago when your plans became more obvious. Charles tried to get closer to read it, but Mr. Cromwell blocked him. In this will, I continued relentlessly, Charles inherits $5,000. Leo inherits $5,000. Penelope inherits nothing, because legally she is not my family, and she has proven that emotionally she isn't either. 5,000! Leo shouted. That's impossible! We're your only children! The rest of my estate, I went on, $4,990,000, will be divided between the Hope Center, 3 charities that protect senior citizens, and Eliza, who has shown more loyalty in 30 years of friendship than you have in a lifetime of being my children. Penelope started to cry, but her tears no longer moved me. Charles slammed his fist on the table in frustration. Leo sank into his chair as if he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. They were ruined. Their entire scheme dissolved in a wave of unexpected facts and ironclad legal preparation. But I offered them one final bitter chance. But there is a way, I said finally, watching them cling to this last shred of hope. What way? Charles asked desperately. The Hope Center needs administrators. It needs committed staff. It needs people who understand the value of human dignity. If you can prove, over the next 5 years, that you truly care about something more than money, if you can prove that you understand the damage you caused me and are willing to repair it, then we can talk about an inheritance. 5 years, Leo muttered, horrified. 5 years working without pay at the Hope Center. 5 years proving you can value older people as human beings, not as obstacles. 5 years proving you deserve to be called my children. The silence stretched for several minutes. I could see their minds working, calculating, evaluating options that no longer existed. And if we refuse? Penelope asked defiantly. Mr. Cromwell smiled, a chilling promise in his expression. Then you face the criminal charges for fraud and attempted defraudation, and you lose any possibility of an inheritance forever. The Hope Center, which was already under construction, was designed to be a refuge for men who lost everything in late-life divorces and women who simply needed a place to grow old with dignity. Tobias, who had remained quiet during the confrontation, admitted, "It's impressive." Construction begins in 6 weeks, I explained. The first phase will be ready in 18 months, and if my children decide to participate in their redemption, they will help build it. What kind of work would we have to do? Leo asked cautiously. All kinds of work, Eliza answered, before I could. Cleaning, gardening, administration, resident care, real work. Honest work, work that will teach you the value of serving instead of being served. But we don't know how to do that kind of work, Penelope protested. You'll learn, I said simply, the same way I learned to do business when I was your age, the same way I learned to invest in the stock market when I was 50, the same way I learned to use computers when I was 60. The difference is, I did it for ambition and growth. You will do it for survival and redemption. Charles stood up and began pacing the room, his hands trembling slightly. This is surreal. 2 days ago we thought. 2 days ago you thought you were the beneficiaries of a multi-million-dollar inheritance. I finished. Now you know you are the protagonists of a lesson about the consequences of family betrayal. And if we do it? Leo asked. If we work at your center for 5 years, will you really change the will? The question I had been waiting for, the question that would determine if this was justice or vengeance. If for 5 years you demonstrate that you can value people for who they are instead of what they own, if you learn to give instead of just take, if you show the kind of character I had hoped I raised in you, then yes, I will modify the will. How much? Asked Penelope. Always direct when it came to money. Enough for you to live comfortably, but not enough for you to turn back into the greedy people you are now. Let's say $500,000 each. $500,000 a fortune for most people, but only a fraction of what they had planned to steal. It was enough to reward real growth, but not so much as to eliminate the need to keep working and growing. And the rest? Charles asked. The rest will remain with the Hope Center forever to ensure that women like me are never again treated as burdens or inconveniences by their own families." Mr. Cromwell closed his laptop with a definitive click. "As I said before, you have 24 hours to decide. Tomorrow at 10:00 the morning, you either arrive at the Hope Center construction site ready to work, or I file the criminal charges with the district attorney's office." He stood to leave. But before he walked out, he added, "And don't bother looking for other lawyers. I have copies of all the evidence in multiple locations. This is not a negotiation. It's an ultimatum." After Mr. Cromwell left, we sat in silence. The weight of the decision filled the room like toxic smoke. "Would you really have us arrested?" Charles asked in a small voice. "Were you really planning to put me in a nursing home while you stole my life?" I asked, echoing his words. My ability to protect myself, my foresight in documenting their actions, and legally shielding my assets was the ultimate proof of my mental competence. This was a lesson learned through observing the fates of many others who were nearly trapped by similar schemes. I remembered the story of Renate, targeted by her son Max and daughter-in-law Lena after she cut off their financial support. They, too, brought in a lawyer, Mr. Son Fisher, claiming that her confusion was normal due to her age and that she was impaired in making financial decisions. Their goal was straightforward: guardianship. Mr. Fisher argued that children have a right to intervene if they believe a parent's ability to make financial decisions is impaired, citing documentation of concerning behaviors. Renate's response was sharp. "I am not confused. I am clearer than I have been in years, and you are going to leave my house right now." When Max, Lena, and Mr. Fisher threatened legal action and guardianship, Renate had already prepared. She told Mr. Fisher, "I suggest you do your research thoroughly before you threaten a 7-1-year-old woman who has managed her finances flawlessly for 40 years. She pointed out that she had raised her son alone, worked honorably until retirement, and until recently, financially supported 2 completely capable adults. She had already planned her counterattack: change all the locks, install a security system, open a new bank account where they had no contact, and most importantly, stop financing the lives of 2 adults who didn't even respect her enough to invite her to their wedding." When they refused to drop the legal harassment, Renate found herself facing a social worker, Miss Schmidt, who had been called to conduct a wellness check based on allegations from her loved ones that painted her as mentally disturbed. "I recognized Lena's handwriting in the wording," Renate recalled. She had always been skilled at manipulating words to get what she wanted. Renate refused to answer questions without her lawyer, Mr. Weber, present. Mr. Weber quickly arrived and challenged the social worker, defending Renate's dignity and her right to privacy. The eventual trial proved Renate's perfect preparation. Witnesses confirmed her excellent mental state, her rational decisions to cut off transfers, and her ability to maintain healthy social relationships. The judge noted that a person protecting their finances from abuse is demonstrating high competence, reinforcing the same principle that saved me. The threat of guardianship and fraud is a common weapon used by abusive relatives seeking to gain control over assets. The key, as Mr. Coleman advised, is documentation and proactive legal measures. I remembered another parallel tale involving Marisol, whose son Marcus and daughter-in-law Angelica were plotting to steal her house. Marisol discovered their plan through a hidden camera, recording their full conspiracy, including their discussions about having a lawyer named Albert fast-track the property transfer for a fee of $25,000. They planned to sell her house for $500,000 and place Marisol in an affordable retirement home. When they presented Marisol with documents' standard forms, they claimed she recognized the complex legal terms: transfer, assignment of rights, irrevocable power of attorney. They wanted complete control over her life. Marisol wisely refused to sign immediately, buying time despite their frantic insistence. "We really need you to sign today. The lawyer gave us an appointment for early tomorrow," Marcus urged. "I'm old, not an idiot," Marisol retorted. forcing them to reveal their desperation. When Marisol finally confronted them with her evidence, the recordings of their conversations about the fraud, the $25,000 fee for the forgeries, and the plan to call her an obstacle, they executed a diabolical pivot. They attempted to flip her evidence into proof of her own mental instability. A woman who installs secret cameras to spy on her family, Angelica scoffed, who invents elaborate theories about theft and conspiracies, who refuses to sign basic legal documents out of paranoia. They reinterpreted every piece of her discovery as evidence of her own decline. Albert is a real lawyer who's helping us with real legal paperwork, Angelica insisted. The $25,000 are his fees for a complex job of updating documentation, all completely legal. They argued that the discussions about selling the house were merely discussions about future options, in case you ever need specialized care. Marisol felt the floor opening beneath her feet. They were completely turning the situation around, converting my discovery of their betrayal into evidence of my own supposed mental instability. This demonstrated the true danger of these conspiracies. The abusers weaponized the victim's attempts at self-protection. If Marisol hadn't already had her legal team ready and her defense prepared, she would have fallen victim to this psychological warfare. Ultimately, Marisol set a trap. She had high-quality recording devices installed, ensuring irrefutable evidence. When they confronted her again, believing they had already destroyed her previous proof, they walked right into her trap. They admitted everything, driven by arrogance and greed. You admit you're a stupid old woman who almost ruined a perfect plan. Angelica exploded. But it doesn't matter because in the end, you're going to sign these documents anyway. Marcus added the final chilling threat. If I refuse, we'll have to resort to Plan B, a fake medical certificate that declares you're not in the right mental state to handle your affairs. Our future without you, Marcus added with absolute coldness. Because frankly, Mom, you've already served your purpose in our lives. That was the confession Marisol needed. When Marcus held out the pen for her to sign, she simply dropped it on the table. You're right about one thing, she told him with a calm smile, that I'm a stupid old woman. But I'm not so stupid as to sign my own death sentence. Immediately, the front door opened, and the detective, 2 uniformed police officers, and her elder protection lawyer walked in. Marcus and Angelica were arrested for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted document forgery, and elder financial abuse. The high-quality recordings captured their explicit confessions, sealing their fate. The lawyer confirmed that Marisol's right to record conversations on her own property when there is reasonable suspicion of criminal activity was absolute. This is the power of preparation. This is why my lawyer, Mr. Cromwell, insisted on securing the assets before the confrontation. In my case, the asset protection was comprehensive. Not only did I move the primary residence to a protected trust, but I also restructured my entire $5 million estate. The act of protecting the main house was crucial. When Leo and Charles asked me to sign papers to sell the house, they truly believed they were securing a $600,000 asset. But that asset was already legally separated from my direct control, ensuring that even if they forced a guardianship through a corrupt doctor, the estate would be protected. I remembered the plight of Ella, whose son Henry and daughter-in-law Marlene wanted her house. They, too, were trying to use incompetence claims. Henry handed her a document, telling her to sign it for her own good. But Ella knew better. She confronted Henry and Marlene, revealing that she had documented months of abuse, recorded their conversations, and had been live-streaming their current confrontation to multiple witnesses, including a lawyer specializing in elder abuse and an investigative journalist. "You can't use any of this," Marlene screamed. "It's private conversations. It's an invasion of privacy." "Honey," Ella replied with infinite patience, "documenting abuse isn't an invasion of privacy. It's survival." Ella revealed the real will, the one she had signed that morning, declaring that all her property and savings would go to a foundation for single mothers. Not a single cent will go to people who treat the elderly like garbage. Like me, Ella had anticipated the confrontation. and used the law, documentation, and a strategically timed legal maneuver to protect herself. The consequences of failing to protect assets can be devastating. I learned that from Isabella Hayes, who returned from the hospital to find her house occupied by her daughter-in-law Veronica's parents. Her son, Richard, had tricked her into signing a power of attorney before her surgery, which they immediately used to transfer her house and drain her accounts. Isabella, a former banker, discovered they were involved in a massive mortgage fraud scheme, identifying vulnerable seniors in her neighborhood and using predatory loans to seize properties. Richard, her own son, was complicit, even having taken out a life insurance policy on her 6 months prior. Isabella, like me, used her mental acuity to fight back. She and her lawyer, Gloria, documented the Sterling's history of fraud and exposed their scheme, leading to their arrest by the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. Richard, when confronted later, offered pathetic excuses, blaming Veronica and her father, Raymond. He claimed he didn't know they were stealing, only moving funds to safer investments for her retirement. "That's not helping, Richard," Isabella told him, refusing to let maternal love cloud her judgment. "That's cruelty." The police found documents indicating that someone intentionally altered her care during her hospital stay. This escalated the charges to possible attempted homicide. The story of Isabella taught me that the betrayal isn't just financial. It's often a calculated plan to eliminate the victim entirely. My own children, Charles and Leo, were caught on tape hoping I would die soon and discussing putting me in the cheapest home we can find. The attempt to declare me mentally incompetent was just one step in their progression toward total elimination. This is why my preemptive move, transferring my house into a protected legal entity, was essential. When they arrived with their forged papers, intending to argue that I was too confused to handle a complex sale, I was ready. The house was no longer mine to sell. It belonged to the trust. When Mr. Cromwell, my lawyer, was addressing the charges and the criminal investigation, he reiterated the gravity of their actions. He detailed the consequences: attempted defraudation, forgery, and elder abuse. The ultimatum of 5 years of community service at the Hope Center or criminal charges was a definitive end to their sense of entitlement. Charles and Leo, spoiled and incapable of real work, faced a horrifying choice: honest labor or jail. Eliza was quick to detail the work they would be expected to do: cleaning, gardening, administration. Real work. Penelope protested, "But we don't know how to do that kind of work." "You'll learn," I repeated. They had learned to calculate the value of my property. Now they would learn the value of human dignity. The final financial stipulation was precise: $500,000 each if they completed the 5 years, contingent on showing true character. The rest, over $4 million, would remain with the Hope Center forever. This ensured that the foundation established to protect seniors like me would be financially secure, a permanent barrier against family greed. Mr. Cromwell's final words before leaving were clear: "This is not a negotiation. It's an ultimatum." I watched them squirm, knowing that their comfortable lives of dependency were over. They had believed that my age rendered me weak and susceptible, a passive obstacle easily removed by a well-placed signature or a fake medical certificate. What they failed to understand, just like Darren and Tiffany or Henry and Marlene, is that surviving decades of life, raising ungrateful children, and building an empire requires cunning, patience, and a deep, strategic intelligence. That intelligence, honed by experience, allowed me to document their every move, anticipate their legal strategy, and secure my future before they even realized the game had begun. The look on Leo's face when he realized his supposed $5 million inheritance was actually a $5,000 bequest. That was priceless. The realization that they were now forced to work for their redemption, that their entire scheme had been an elaborate failure orchestrated by the very woman they called incompetent, was the sweetest victory. My resilience, my determination to protect my estate from family abuse, was the clearest demonstration of mental competence I could possibly offer. I was no victim. I was the architect of my own justice. Like this video if it touched something in you. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about what it means to be human, to be family, and to choose love even when it's complicated. I'll see you next time.